Today, I want to share a story that begins with an unsettling discovery and a confrontation that would unravel the fragile threads of family ties. A story about loss, betrayal, redemption, and the complexities of familial relationships. This narrative revolves around Owen, a 36-year-old freelance architect. Owen is passionate about sustainable design, creating innovative spaces that harmonize with the environment. But on this particular day, his life would take an unexpected and disheartening turn. Owen walked towards his detached workshop and studio in the backyard, a sanctuary where creativity and craftsmanship came together. This workshop was more than just a place to work. It housed years of dedication, tools he cherished, and projects he envisioned. As he approached, something felt off. An uneasy sense crept over him. He stood before the double doors, heavily reinforced with a sturdy chain and padlock, only to find that they had been cut wide open. A growing pit in his stomach signaled that something was terribly wrong. Stepping inside, Owen's heart sank. The space that once resonated with the hum of creativity was now an empty shell of disarray. His professional-grade drone, a recent acquisition for capturing aerial photography of his architectural designs, was gone. Along with it vanished a limited edition architectural art print, a vintage drafting table lamp that had been passed down through generations, and a small box of rare architectural blueprints that held immense sentimental and professional value. As Owen began to process the loss, his mind raced with questions. Who could have done this? Why would anyone want to target him? As he reviewed the motion-activated footage from his outdoor security cameras, his heart pounded. The faces on the screen revealed a shocking reality. There, in the soft glow of daylight, were the unmistakable figures of his half-sister, Chloe, and her three sons. Liam, age 16, Noah, 14, and Caleb, 12, appeared mischievous yet determined as they approached his workshop armed with heavy-duty bolt cutters. They must have scouted the area, making their plans under the cover of secrecy. Unnerved by the gravity of the situation, he felt a turmoil of emotions wash over him. Confrontation was inevitable. Owen knew he had to face Chloe and Gary, her partner, a self-employed handyman, whose sporadic work seemed to leave the family in a precarious financial state. As he drove over to their home, anticipation and dread intertwined. When Owen arrived, he found Chloe and Gary in their modest living room. The air was thick with tension as he presented the undeniable video evidence on his tablet. Initially, they flared up in defensive anger, claiming Owen was being paranoid. It was all too easy for them to accuse him of being naive, suggesting that his possessions had been an open invitation to mischief and misfortune. But when Owen played the footage, the reality struck. They were caught red-handed. The confrontation escalated quickly. Chloe and Gary begrudgingly returned the vintage lamp and the art print, but there was no sign of remorse. The drone was long gone, sold for over $1,200 to an anonymous buyer online. The architectural blueprints, crushed and discarded like yesterday's trash, had been scattered in a nearby ditch. Owen felt a sense of violation, as if a part of his identity had been ruthlessly stripped away. As the tension simmered, Owen's resolve crystallized. I am not leaving this as it is. I demand full restitution for the drone, the replacement cost for the blueprints, and the repair of the workshop door and cut chain. This is unacceptable. It was a fair request, but the response he received was nothing short of jarring. Chloe's tone shifted from anger to a defensive plea that blamed Owen for tempting the boys with his expensive gadgets and fancy work. Owen's heart ached with betrayal. This was family, a bond formed through shared blood and history, and yet here they stood, pivoting from their son's actions to peddle excuses. They accused him of being unfeeling, of not recognizing the struggles they faced. Owen felt a fire ignite within him, a resolve fueled by his sense of fairness. With a steady voice, he laid down a firm ultimatum. You have 48 hours to repay the money, or this goes to the Maple Creek Police Department. Burdened by the weight of the situation, Owen turned away from the confrontation, vowing that he would no longer let their actions dictate his peace of mind. This moment marked the beginning of a tumultuous journey, a story that would weave together threads of conflict, emotional turmoil, and ultimately the hope for redemption. The repercussions of their actions would ripple through their lives in unexpected ways, challenging the very fabric of family loyalty and trust. and as Owen drove away, he could not shake the sense that this was only the beginning. As the days passed following the unsettling confrontation with Chloe and Gary, Owen found that the initial fury coursing through his veins was slowly giving way to an unsettling suspicion. Despite the return of some of his stolen possessions, the aching void left by the missing drone haunted him. A professional-grade drone, it was not just a tool, it represented his passion, his work, and the very essence of his architectural journey. It became increasingly clear that the greater battle lay not only within the material loss, but in the sheer disbelief that his own family could betray him in such a callous manner. Once again, Owen decided to review the footage from his security cameras. Watching those frames unfold felt surreal. There was Chloe's son, Liam, with that cocky glint, leading the charge as he wielded the bolt cutters, his younger brothers following closely, glancing around with mischief and a hint of fear. Owen felt anger swell inside him, mixed with sadness. The boys had once been bright, innocent, their laughter echoing through family gatherings. Now they were entangled in a web of bad decisions and destructive behavior. Would they ever truly understand the consequences of their actions? The pivotal moment arrived unexpectedly one evening as he sat alone in his quiet workshop, the weight of his predicament sinking in. Owen contemplated the next steps, ticking through options in his mind. Should he let it fade into a regrettable chapter of family history, or should he pursue justice? As he waded through the toxic mix of betrayal and helplessness, a sudden determination surged through him. This was no longer just about a drone. It was about holding them accountable and reaffirming his boundaries. That night, he received a surprising message from Liam. It came in the form of a Snapchat photo, an openly defiant gesture, featuring Liam flipping Owen off while holding what appeared to be a thick wad of cash. Owen's heart raced. This was the money from the sale of the drone. He was sure of it. The message sent shivers down his spine. It was as if Liam was taking pride in a crime, boasting about his apparent victory. Disgusted yet resolute, Owen knew he had to act. The next morning, he filed a detailed report with the Maple Creek Police Department. He included the video footage that provided undeniable evidence, alongside the now unmistakable trail leading to the boys and the brazen defiance encapsulated in Liam's photograph. The weight of reality crashed upon him. This was now a matter for the law. He could not allow them to paint him as the villain in this narrative any longer. Owen documented all the items that had been previously reported missing, including a specialized set of antique woodworking tools, a high-precision laser measuring device, and several rare architectural history books. He painted a complete picture for the authorities, detailing how the boys had likely used an abandoned construction dolly from a nearby site to transport the larger items. Within days, the police acted upon Owen's report. The boys were charged with breaking and entering, grand larceny due to the considerable value of the drone, and harassment. For Owen, those charges did not come from a place of glee or satisfaction. Rather, they marked a sobering moment of clarity. He had exhausted all efforts to resolve this amicably, and now the situation had escalated into a serious legal matter with consequences far beyond his initial envisioning. The anxiety buzzed around him as he waited to hear from the police. Would this really pan out the way he hoped? By the following Friday afternoon, word came. The police had issued warrants, and they were in the process of arresting teenage boys accustomed to feeling invincible. The weight of smugness disappeared from their faces as they were taken into custody. What began as a demeanor steeped in insufferable bravado shifted quickly to fear and confusion. Owen could almost feel their panic through the airwaves of news reports relayed back to him. Chloe and Gary were confused and enraged. They would blame Owen for their son's fate. Owen steeled himself for their impending confrontation. It was inevitable, but even as Chloe threatened to make this a family battle, Owen found himself standing firmly within his convictions. He was not the villain in this story. He was merely setting the scales of justice right. By the weekend, Owen tried to catch his breath, feeling a mix of dread and responsibility wash over him. This was no small event. It was a profound psychological junction for a family struggling to understand the gravity of their actions. He worried about their trajectory, particularly for the meaner Liam, who had already shown signs of deep-seated issues. He knew that this was not just about immediate profits lost. It was about the long, hard road of healing, reality checks, and painful discussions ahead. Still, he resolved to see this through. There was no turning back now. A line had been drawn in the sand, and the ramifications of their actions were as clear as the broken chain securing his workshop. Owen prayed there might still be a glimmer of hope to salvage relationships. He would not resign himself to despair. As he prepared to navigate the challenges of the court process, a stubborn spark ignited within him. Justice has its costs, but it also could lead to understanding. He would continue to fight not only for what was lost, but for what could potentially be rebuilt, a family value system that might, with the right time and effort, educate and uplift rather than destroy. As the legal saga unfolded against Owen's half-sister's sons, he could not shake the feeling that their actions were merely the culmination of a much deeper, more troubling history. It was as if he had been unwittingly ensnared in a web spun long before the recent theft, years of misguided parenting and misbehavior that had gone unchecked. Owen's mind drifted back to earlier incidents, memories replaying like a film on loop, each episode tinged with disbelief and frustration. When Liam, Noah, and Caleb were younger, they had been the picture of vibrant youth. Those carefree days had once been filled with laughter during family gatherings, birthday celebrations, and holiday festivities. Owen could almost recall the warmth of their voices, the joy reflected in their faces as they played around the pool or built makeshift forts in the backyard. But over the years that innocence began to corrode, replaced with a more unsettling pattern of behavior that he could no longer ignore. The mischief had started small, missing electronics here and there, items disappearing from Owen's home, typically dismissed by Chloe and Gary as harmless antics of growing boys. Yet, what had once seemed like trivial pranks steadily morphed into something more sinister. As Owen considered the escalating incidents, he had felt compelled to act out of a sense of self-preservation and familial duty. He installed hidden security cameras in his main house, hoping to deter the boys when he was away. One infamous incident bubbled to the surface of his memory, a chilling reminder of just how far things had gone. One winter weekend, Owen had taken a short trip out of town, leaving the boys unsupervised. With his absence, the thrill of the forbidden had become irresistible. Using an old spare key that Owen had unwisely hidden beneath a garden gnome, they gained unauthorized entry to his home. Upon discovering the invasion, Owen felt the jolt of disbelief morph into a simmering rage as he learned the extent of their chaotic spree. They had made off with a case of finely crafted beers, each one aged to perfection, a personal victory for Owen that had been meant to enhance future gatherings. But what had truly rattled him was not just the theft, it was the utter disregard exhibited by the boys. They had vandalized his home office, deleting vital project files from his computer and leaving behind a toxic residue of chemical odor, a terrible reminder of their inability to respect property and personal space. Chloe and Gary's reaction to that incident was troubling in its own right. Instead of addressing the boys' behavior with the seriousness it warranted, they dismissed it as nothing more than boys being rambunctious or a childish prank. Time and again they had redirected Owen's concern toward his perceived excessive emphasis on discipline. Their insistence that Owen was being too austere only fueled his resolve to keep those boys at bay. Following that pivotal episode, Owen made a decision that illustrated the depth of his concern, a decision that rattled the familial structure. He changed all the locks, disabling the spare key, and formally banned them from his property. It was a measure of self-defense, but also a painful admission that frequent infractions necessitated drastic boundaries. Owen felt a weight settle in the pit of his stomach, a blend of grief and necessity. He had lost parts of what he once hoped could be a meaningful relationship with his nephews. Each interaction after that felt like walking on eggshells. The boys' reactions ranged from hurt feelings to outright resentment, especially from Liam, who had taken those changes the hardest. Owen had all but closed the door on those relationships, confident that it was the only way to protect himself from future betrayals. Day after day he wrestled with the implications of his actions. Had he merely postponed the inevitable, or had he provided necessary consequences that could help steer them back toward the right path? But as Owen found himself deep in this unfolding family drama, he could not help but wonder if there were alternate routes they might have traversed. Perhaps with the right guidance, Liam and his brothers could have recalibrated their moral compasses instead of sliding further into deviance. Now, as Owen faced the consequences of the boys' actions, criminal charges, and a potential rift within the family, he could not shake the idea that these incidents had been camouflaged warnings. They were the quiet storms gathering on the horizon, signaling that the relationships he once cherished had been irrevocably altered. Ultimately, the struggle played out not just in the courtroom, but within the complex tapestry of family dynamics. It became increasingly clear that Owen was not just fighting for material restitution. He was grappling with the broader implications of what these persistent issues meant for families, trust, and accountability. As much as he wanted to redirect his anguish into anger towards Chloe and her partner, he recognized that they too were entangled in this mess, caught in their own web of denial and complicity. The pain of betrayal was mutual, and the road ahead seemed painfully uncertain, fraught with questions of forgiveness, responsibility, and the hope for supplication. As the legal saga unfolded against Chloe and Gary's sons, Owen could not shake the sinking feeling that their actions were the violent crescendo of a much deeper, troubling history. Years of misguided parenting, misbehavior, and a culture of denial had combined, ultimately leading to this moment. The weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air, a tangible reminder of bonds strained and fractured. Owen could not look back without recalling each moment of negligence and impulsiveness that had defined the boys' trajectories over the years. Liam, Noah, and Caleb had once been typical, energetic children, developing their unique personalities with each passing year. Owen could still remember family gatherings filled with laughter and joy. Their innocent play and childlike wonder seemed endless. Yet that innocence had gradually corroded, replaced by more unsettling behavior that Owen could no longer ignore. As he reflected upon their misdeeds, he felt the tightening grip of helplessness. Initially, the boys had embarked on harmless pranks, merely teasing the edges of acceptable behavior, missing electronics and borrowed items from Owen's home, all easily dismissed by Chloe and Gary as nothing more than childish antics. However, these casual infractions had paved the way for a far more dangerous pattern of misbehavior, a troubling descent into a reality Owen had desperately tried to avoid. Owen's memories churned as he recalled a winter weekend that had served as a turning point in their relationship. While he had been away, the boys had discovered an old spare key that Owen had carelessly hidden beneath a garden gnome. The thrill of breaking into his home quickly beckoned them. Upon returning to his house, Owen's disbelief morphed into simmering rage as he learned of their chaotic spree. The damage inflicted upon his sanctuary was staggering. They had stolen a carefully curated case of craft beers and vandalized his home office, deleting painstakingly crafted project files while leaving behind the unmistakable scent of chemical residue that hovered like a cloud over a ruined treasure. Deeply troubled by the events that had unfolded, Owen had confronted Chloe and Gary about their son's reckless behavior. However, even this unfortunate incident had been met with defiance and warning. They dismissed Owen's concerns as nothing more than a misunderstanding, a belief that spiraled into accusations that he was being too hard on their boys, refusing to acknowledge the overwhelming evidence presented to them. After that incident, Owen had felt an immense burden crush him beneath its weight. Desperate for a semblance of safety and mental peace, he had decided to change all the locks and disable the spare key permanently. It was a measure born from fear but also regret. He had lost what he once hoped could be a meaningful relationship with his nephews. Day after day, Owen wrestled with the reality of that decision, questioning whether he had postponed the inevitable rift in family relationships or sought to provide necessary consequences for irresponsible behavior. He often found himself reflecting on whether there were alternate paths he could have pursued. Perhaps with appropriate guidance, the boys could recalibrate their moral compasses, but it became painfully clear that the existing patterns would not simply disappear on their own. Now, with decades of familial history swirling in his mind, Owen faced the consequences of the boys' actions head-on. They had been charged with offenses that were indicative of deeper underlying issues. Breaking and entering, grand larceny, and harassment had become the labels that defined them in the eyes of the law. As his legal battle unfolded, Owen felt compelled to join the fight, to hold Chloe and Gary accountable for their role in this turbulent journey. It was no longer just about recovering material losses. It was a struggle for respect, accountability, and a chance to rebuild, understanding that true family bonds must come with mutual respect and trust. But as Owen delved deeper into this crisis, he remained painfully aware of the familial ramifications that stretched far beyond the courtroom. The rift that had emerged during the rancorous exchange left scars that no amount of evidence or logic could heal. As he sat in the quiet of his workshop, The once beloved space now a battleground in his mind, he could not help but wonder if his struggle was not merely against Chloe and her partner, but against a legacy of dysfunction that threatened to ensnare them all. Would they ultimately find a way back, or were they fated to spiral further into darkness? The questions loomed large, echoing relentlessly in the cavernous silence. As winter draped its cold, still blanket over Maple Creek, Owen reflected on the roller coaster journey that had unraveled since that fateful day in his workshop. The landscape outside was bare, much like the delicate fabric of relationships he had once taken for granted. The scars of betrayal etched deeply into the farm's soil reminded him that emotional wounds often proved harder to heal than physical ones. Noah and Caleb had made tangible efforts to turn their lives around. The moments they spent together now bloomed like the first flowers of spring, tentative yet filled with hope. Owen cherished these interactions, for they symbolized a fragile peace born from the destruction both Liam's actions and their shared family history had wrought. His nights were often filled with laughter once more, resonating with the sound of board games being re-engaged and movies played without a worry about the past shadow lurking around every corner. However, a constant hum of anxiety lingered beneath this smiles-at-dinner surface. Liam's presence remained a dark cloud on the horizon, increasingly distant yet unshakable. Even as the days morphed him into an adult, his struggle with bipolar disorder cast long shadows that extended into Owen's heart. Each fleeting moment of connection with the younger brothers was tainted by the awareness of Liam's ongoing battle, the broken links in their familial chain holding everyone at an arm's length. The complexities of parenting that both Chloe and Gary grappled with became evident during family gatherings. In their quest for normalcy, they often appeared like lost souls wandering the hallways of family events, filled with mixed feelings of shame and desperation. The realization that Owen had a right to his pain transformed some of the resentment Chloe once feigned. It began to resonate as guilt, and awareness of the havoc that lingered in the aftermath of Liam's choices. One crisp afternoon, as Owen wandered into his workshop, he stumbled across a dusty box buried deep underneath his workbench. He unlatched it, revealing remnants of his early architectural ambitions, sketches and projects he had thought long forgotten. In that moment, a wave of nostalgia washed over him, igniting a spark of a plan. He began to contemplate reaching out to the boys, Noah, Caleb, and even Liam, in an attempt to foster an environment that could nurture their creativity. Perhaps together, they could rediscover what once brought them joy, the passion for design and architecture that had initially united them long before this painful saga began. In this endeavor, Owen envisioned a summer project for the boys in his renovated workshop, teaching them how to use those very tools that had once inspired him. There would be no clouds of judgment, no echoes of the past suffocating their creative impulses, just fresh beginnings where friendships could flourish anew. It felt like a risk, but perhaps it was one worth taking, remembering that the rise of fresh blooms often follows the harshest winters. As the spring days grew longer, so did Owen's hope. An invitation was crafted, carefully considering each word, consciously reaching for understanding rather than perfection. Towards the end of the invitation, Owen penned an open-minded note alluding to growth instead of chastisement. This diverse family history, with its tangled roots, did not have to define their future. As Owen tentatively placed the invitation in the mailboxes next to their home, he realized he was ready, not just to take the plunge to offer them a chance for reconciliation, but to embrace the uncertainty that lay ahead. In the inevitable storms life brings, there is often the chance for rebirth, a place where healing begins. And standing on that threshold of possibility, poised delicately between the potential of hurt and the beauty of love, Owen felt a newfound resolve. Yes, it was risky, but in facing this new challenge, he would be writing a monumental chapter in their transitory family saga, a story no longer bound by pain but propelled forward by the heavy weight of shared redemption. Now, as we draw the curtain on this saga, may each of you remember that even amidst our deepest trials, growth and hope can thrive. Connections can rekindle in the unlikeliest of places, and families may find balance again, piece by piece. Thank you for joining me on this journey through emotional landscapes, familial bonds, and the transformative power of forgiveness. If you appreciated this story, please leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts or experiences. Your engagement helps us build a community of support and growth. Do not forget to subscribe for future stories that explore the resilience of the human spirit. Share this journey with your friends who may benefit and reflect on the power of family ties. Until next time, cherish the connections you hold close and embrace the power of forgiveness in your own life. Thank you for watching. This has been a narrative exploration, capturing lives intertwined through strife and growth. Let the journey continue, and let us find strength in our shared stories. Until next time.